All right, we are live. Welcome in. It is week 1 of FSM Fantasy Football Sunday. We made it, you guys. We are finally here. Everything is ready to go, and this is a really exciting time. And there's going to be a lot of sort of challenges along the way with this being a live broadcast. But so what? What we want out of this purely is for this to be an interactive show for you guys. First and foremost, that is my priority here. You guys are taking time out of your day to watch the show and to be a part of what we're doing here. And so I'm grateful for that. There's a lot of excitement here. We had a radio audience for a very long time, 4 years over at 610. And so we wanted to create a new type of show. Something that was going to be a little bit more original, a little bit more unique. And primarily as well, we wanted it to be something that we could all have a conversation with together. So since we're on Facebook Live, I should be able to get a lot of your guys' comments right up on the screen. If you have questions, and feel free to test it out as well. Like I said, we're sort of learning on the fly together. So if you have questions, or if you want to just give a wave and have it say that you're here, I already see the 2 people have already hopped on, so thank you guys for joining us this morning. Here's what we're going to do today. We're going to go over the matchups. We're going to have a discussion about the early slate, break things down moving towards the late part of the Sunday slate, and get into the Sunday night game with my Chicago Bears taking on the Green Bay Packers at Lambeau. I am optimistic, but I'm not necessarily... hello, Seth. Thank you so much for hopping on with us today. It's good to have you back, man. I know you've been a part of several shows before. I'm optimistic about the Bears today. I think they're going to keep it competitive. The defense, I think, at some point has the ability to shape themselves into a top 5 defense this year. I don't know if Khalil Mack is going to play the entirety of the game, but I think the expectation is that he's going to be on the field. And they're going to want him to be integrated as much as possible. I also don't know if you guys can hear me a little bit, but I'm battling a bit of a cold, bit of a sinus thing. So we're going to power through this together. And then, of course, a couple of the Monday night games as well. You have the Jets going to Detroit in the first one, and then the Rams traveling to Oakland to face off against John Gruden and the Raiders. I think if there's one good thing about sort of having like a little bit of congestion and stuffed up, is that the Berman impression tends to come out a little bit more. You tend to sound a little bit more, hey, it comes and it's right there and you feel it. Also, we're going to try something as well. I want to show you guys, if we have the ability to do so, a lot of the contests that are happening over at Fantasy Sports Markets today. Is very exciting. So let's see if I can share the screen with you guys. There should be a way to be able to do this. Big thanks to Ecamm Live, who we're using for this new platform. All right, so we're going to go to share screen. And hi, yeah, that's me and my wife. All right, so here you go, over at fantasysportsmarkets.com. If you have not partaken in games with us before, this is a great place to be able to play fantasy football. So right now I am on our main page, on our main lobby. Hopefully you guys got a chance to partake in some college football yesterday, but look at all the contests that we have active for today, for Sunday. We got a $10 contest with $200 to first place. There's still 20 entries left, and you have up to 5 entries. Look at this bonus. 5-0-0-0, $50,000 perfect roster bonus. And it's a lot easier to do when you're putting your lineups together without having to worry about a salary cap. So if you've never played before, let me show you how it works. You go and select your contest, and you can also get there by the NFL menu right up at the top too. That'll take you directly there. And then once you're there, you have the list of all your different positions, the search feature. So let's say, you guys are going to give me a hard time about this. Let's say I really want to play Tyrod Taylor. Oh, look who it is. He's going to be running the ball a lot today because there's going to be some serious issues with the wind over in Cleveland today. When you go ahead and plug him in, and then you just fill out the rest of your team. So we'll go through some of our favorite plays a little bit later on in the show over at fantasysportsmarkets.com. A lot of our specific daily fantasy plays today because there's so many that are really intriguing. We have a flex spot. We're still one of the sites that continues to do kicker just because I like the variance there. We wanted to incorporate a flex because we know that a lot of people like to have those options. But kickers are people too. That's the expression. So we wanted to make sure that we included them over at fantasysportsmarkets.com. Let's go ahead and add Mr. Gostowski for now. Steven Gostowski will be the kicker of choice for today. And a lot of people have been asking this as well. You go ahead and you fill out your team. What is the tiebreaker value? The tiebreaker value is what you believe your expected final total score of your team will be. And it's partially because when you have situations where there are ties in a lot of these contests with your scoring, the tiebreaker is the ultimate breaking point. So if you're in the $200 bomb contest today here at Fantasy Sports Markets, if you decided that your final score was, you thought your final score would be about 155, and a pretty good day usually ends up at somewhere between 140 and 170 for fantasy points over at FSM. You type in your tiebreaker, and whoever's closest to the tiebreaker ends up getting the points. So there's no ties in between. The tiebreaker does matter. Also, for you guys that are watching the video today, as I go ahead and remove my shared screen, we'll go ahead and get back to the main source here. Okay, here we go. Very good. Promo code Homer, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to type this up real quick. Promo code Homer, and that should show up on the screen in just a second. Aha! There we go. Promo code Homer at fantasysportsmarkets.com will get you $10 to use without a deposit required. And that's something that we really want to be able to make sure you guys get a chance to try it. We appreciate you guys being a part of the show today. That's really important to us, the fact that you guys have taken time out of your schedule to join us. So if you go to fantasysportsmarkets.com, use that promo code Homer, Homer, $10 will go directly into your account. You don't have to worry about a deposit. And you can get a chance to start playing right away in some of those big contests. Okay. Again, if you guys have questions or you want to continue to interact with the show, we are here. We will take them all throughout the show. Here's what's coming up. 9:30, we're scheduled to be joined by my buddy Elliot Christ over at the Quant Edge. If you have not used the Quant Edge yet, it is a fantastic resource for daily fantasy football and also for season long as well. We were going back and forth today. It's obviously the first week of their launch, so if he doesn't join us, we'll just take your questions, and that's coming up in about 22 minutes at 9:30 today. And then, if you were a listener to Fantasy Football Sunday over at 610 Sports Radio over the last 4 years, you guys are very familiar with my good buddy from SiriusXM Fantasy Sports Radio and Fantasy Alarm, Justin Fensterman. He is coming with us. He will take your lineup questions, and we'll also just go over some of the bigger questions of the day in the world of Week 1 in fantasy football. So he's going to be there for you guys. So again, any questions you guys might have, go ahead and throw them in the comment section here so I can make sure that I'm keeping track of them. And even as we go through the games together, we can take a break and respond and go back and forth. If there's even just something intriguing that you guys want to get into, we are here for you. All right, you guys ready? Let's start going through some of the early slate games, and we will begin by talking about the Cincinnati Bengals and the Indianapolis Colts. So start with the things that you guys need to know. The Colts right now, 2.5-point favorites at home. That's been bet down from them being 3-point favorites at home. And this is one of the few games where the over-under has actually gone up. I was looking at all the different games, and I was really surprised by how many games totals have gone down so far in Week 1. And last year in Week 1, you saw a lot of high-scoring games. I'm thinking about the Thursday night game in particular between the Kansas City Chiefs and the New England Patriots, a game that really nobody, other than my former 610 host, Brad Fanning, expected the Chiefs to win. He was the only one. And sure enough, they ended up getting out a big win in Week 1, surprised a lot of people. And I just look at this week's slate and say, you know what, I understand why a lot of these totals are coming down. There's some intriguing matchups for sure. But this is one of those games where I think you're going to see a lot of points. As far as news and notes go, Marlon Mack of the Indianapolis Colts is going to be a game time decision. He's been going back and forth, so it could be Jordan Wilkins getting some carries, maybe a little bit of Nyheim Hayes. I wouldn't use anybody, with the Colts today, at least on the running side, because it's just not a good matchup, and you have no idea who it's going to be. So don't get cute, don't get contrarian. I'm not using anybody from Indianapolis. Andrew Luck is back, coming back from that severe shoulder injury. And I think he's going to be in an offense that is beneficial to his recovery. Frank Reich is the new head coach over in Indianapolis. They used a lot of short passes. They moved him around during the preseason. So I fully expect the goal of Indianapolis this season is to keep Andrew Luck healthy, to keep him upright, and to keep him on the football field. So I know that a lot of people love Cincinnati's front seven. They're going to put pressure on Luck. But the Colts offensive line, they used the draft pick on Quentin Nelson to try and get better. They made sure that they're going to keep him as upright as possible all throughout. So I think for everybody that expects Cincinnati to really get after him today, I just don't know if the Colts are going to give him the opportunity to do so. As far as the Bengals are concerned, they're fairly healthy at all the different skill positions. So here's the things that you need to know. I think Andy Dalton and the Cincinnati offense is in a tremendous spot today. I couldn't be more excited about this matchup for them. Andy Dalton going up against the Colts. He's a better road quarterback than he is at home. He's got weapons, you guys. And I know that a lot of people don't love Andy Dalton. That's perfectly fair. But at one point in his career, he was a top 5 fantasy quarterback. I'm not expecting that this year, but I think he gets off to an impressive start in week 1 this year. I look at somebody like AJ Green. Green is somebody that actually is better away from Cincinnati as well, averaging 6.1 catches, 91 yards away from Cincinnati. Evan Silva over at Roto World says this is the best matchup that AJ Green is going to have all season long against the Colts secondary. So that's pretty impressive to think that he's already in this perfect ideal situation right from the very get-go. And then T.Y. Hilton at home is somebody that I like as well. He's averaging 15.1 PPR points when Andrew Luck plays. He also averages 20 more yards indoors, also primarily at home, than he does outdoors. And then one other component to this game that I think we need to keep an eye on is Jack Doyle. The tight end is usually the beneficiary of quarterbacks that like to get the ball out quick. You know, a lot of those quick 3-yard ins and cuts back in. I think Jack Doyle has a chance to be targeted anywhere between 7 to 10 times today. Luck has also looked his way in the red zone. But I love Dalton. He's going to be in several of my lineups today. I think AJ Green might be, I don't want to say complete 100% exposure, but he's going to be in a lot of them today. And I think Tyler Eifert, the fact that he's healthy, when he is healthy, he has produced touchdowns substantially. So I really like him in this spot today. Let's move on to Buffalo and Baltimore, where the Ravens are 7.5-point home favorites, and that's been bet all the way up from when this game opened at the beginning of the week to 4. The over-under has gone down in this game from 42.5 down to 40.5. News and notes, LaShawn McCoy is going to play. There's still no word from the NFL as to whether or not a looming suspension is going to be coming or not, but as for now, he's going to be on the field, and Buffalo is going to need him. So purely from a volume standpoint, I don't love the matchup. In fact, I hate the matchup for LaShawn McCoy and really for anybody on Buffalo, but if you're truly just looking for a volume play, then McCoy theoretically makes sense. The running back on the other side of the ball is the guy that I like a lot more. That's Alex Collins. He's in an absolute smash spot. I saw the stat from Roto World that Collins, after week 10, averaged nearly 20 touches a game. He had 6 rushing touchdowns. That matched Todd Gurley and Latavius Murray for the most in the NFL after week 10. Buffalo also is a team that we targeted several times last year against the run. They were terrible at stopping it. That was the worst in the league in fantasy points allowed. And then the Ravens defense is going to be chalk, but it's hard to argue this type of pick. I think a lot of it is also dependent on what type of game that you're playing. So are you looking to go in one of our cash games? Are you looking at 50-50s? Because in that case, you want to be able to go ahead and play a lot of that chalk and feel comfortable with it. And so I think Baltimore is in that situation where they're a great chalk play today. It's hard to really sort of argue with anything that they're trying to address. The Ravens, they're finally healthy. They have a better and improved secondary, and they get after the quarterback. So imagine going up against somebody like Nathan Peterman, who in his first NFL start last year threw for 5 interceptions. And basically the only reason that they're even having him start is because they feel like Josh Allen isn't ready, that the game is still moving too fast for him. And so with all of that being considered, this is an opportunity for the Ravens defense to really go off, to limit the points, to turn the ball over, get some sacks. They really have an opportunity to collect everything. I know that they're pretty expensive on the salary sites, but again, you don't have to worry about salaries over at fantasy sports markets. So with this defense for Baltimore, I love the play. If you want to go ahead and pair them with Alex Collins together, I think that is an absolutely ideal way to go. Still plenty of time for your questions here over at the new FSM live show, FSM Football Sunday here on Fantasy Sports Markets and the FSM Network. For those of you guys that are just joining us, hello, my name is Ben. You can see my name right directly on the screen. And for those of you guys that are going to be eventually tuning in as a podcast, we will have this in podcast form, hopefully every week for you as well. We will post this video to our Twitter pages and also to YouTube as well. There are going to be plenty of ways for you guys to be able to take in this content, but we chose Facebook Live because we felt that this was going to be the ideal place. It gives you alerts when we're going live, and it's a really good opportunity for interaction and to get your comments as well. Let's keep it going. We got the Tampa Bay Bucs going up against the New Orleans Saints. New Orleans opened up as 7-point home favorites, and that game has been bet up substantially all the way up to 9.5. So an over-under, probably one of the highest of the day. It started at 51.5, and now it's been brought down slightly, 2 points to 49.5. News and notes that you guys need to be concerned about. Mark Ingram has a 4-game PED suspension. He's going to be out this week. Jameis Winston has a 3-game suspension for off-the-field conduct. Peyton Barber is your new starting running back for Tampa Bay, and a guy that I really like this year because I think he can do a little bit of everything. They drafted Ronald Jones in the 2nd round, and he's done nothing to cement himself as a good running back candidate, which is pretty crazy to think about. Like, this is someone that put up very good numbers in college, was a 2nd round draft pick, and has no idea how to pass block, a very poor run blocker, not good in pass catching situations. And that's pretty crazy to think that here we are at the start of the NFL season. Peyton Barber was a guy who's just been there. And a guy that they like and got a handful of carries in the second half last year. But Tampa Bay feels extremely comfortable with him. And I look at somebody like Peyton Barber as viable for this week. I think they're going to look to pass him the ball, especially because they're going to be down. But somebody that could theoretically be a nice trade candidate for you a little bit later on in the season if he gets going. I will say this. Alvin Kamara today is in an excellent spot, but he's going to be extremely chalky and everybody's going to be on him. I was listening to the Daily Fantasy Edge podcast, and they were talking about the likely projected total for Alvin Kamara because Sean Payton and the coaching staff have said, we don't want to give this guy 25 to 30 carries. We want to make sure that he stays healthy. He's an elite weapon, both as a running back and as a wide receiver. And so they sort of put this over-under on totals at 20.5. And I think that's probably fair because I think even if they get off to a really big lead, Kamara's going to be a part of it. He's going to have some big plays today, and he's going to get plenty of yards and chunk plays as well. So I really like him. But I also think they want to keep him fresh and not overuse him. They had an interesting situation. A lot of people thought that Jonathan Williams and Boston Scott, who was a 6th round draft pick for them, were going to be players that were going to get in the way here. And they cut both of them. And they signed Mike Gillislee, who was released from the Patriots. And I worry about Gillislee taking away some of those opportunities for him at the goal line. They brought him in to be a big back to get those yards that typically Ingram would get. And I know that Kamara still put up elite level points, but I just think about all the different running back options today. And I really like Kamara, but I think if I'm doing a tournament, like a large style tournament, like the DeBomb tournament with 60 entries over at Fantasy Sports Markets, I'm probably fading Alvin Kamara today. And I know that scares me a little bit, but I just think that Gillislee has a chance to pop 1 or 2 of his touchdowns, and that caps his value. A couple of the other plays, and we'll get to Seth. I see he's got a couple of questions. We'll get to you guys. Remember, you can leave your questions here, and we will get to them right here on the broadcast live. I think Mike Evans is going to get a ton of volume from Ryan Fitzpatrick today because they're going to be down and they're going to be throwing the ball quite a lot. And Barber is a good pass catcher, and they feel comfortable with him in pass catching situations. As far as other Saints, I know my buddy Jeremy Sickle, hopefully if he's watching the broadcast today. What's up, Jeremy? I know you're big on the Saints today. Drew Brees, absolutely in play. Michael Thomas, very much in play. In fact, Thomas might have a chance to be a little bit contrarian because everybody's going to be on Alvin Kamara. Ben Watson, their tight end, is in a really interesting spot. I just don't know what to expect from Cam Meredith. I don't know what to expect from Traquan Smith. And so I'm not ready to play those guys yet, even in deep tournaments, because I just feel like I need to see something from them. All right, let's get to some of your guys' questions. We got a couple from Seth. Let's start with, I need one running back and one flex in a standard league between Royce Freeman, Devin Funchess, Peyton Barber, and Corey Davis. I'm going to go ahead and rule out Devin Funchess, even though I like the matchup for Carolina. It's a good one, but I feel like that's going to be sort of a lower scoring game. I like Carolina's defense quite a bit. So I'll rule him out for now. I would probably say between Freeman and Barber, if I had to choose running back. I know that Barber's going to get the volume, and Freeman has a really intriguing matchup against Seattle, but we don't know whether it's going to be him. We don't know if it's going to be Devontae Booker. I think moving forward in the season, I'm going to love Royce Freeman in standard leagues. I'm really going to enjoy him then because he's a physical downhill runner, sort of very similar to a Marshawn Lynch from back in the day. He's fine in pass catching situations, but I think that's the likely place that they will use Devontae Booker. So I'm going to go Barber this week because I just know that he's going to get the volume. As for the flex, I think I'm probably willing to roll with Corey Davis because the matchup is better. Miami secondary, and we'll get to that matchup in a little bit. Their secondary is pretty terrible. They were one of the worst in football a season ago. They haven't done a whole lot to really rectify the situation. And I just think Funchess is capped, and there's so many weapons for Carolina to go to. Versus Corey Davis is the clear-cut number one wide receiver on Tennessee. If you don't count Delaney Walker in that category, who I love this week. So I would probably say Peyton Barber and Corey Davis would be your running back and your flex. Sounds like you have another question, Seth. Half-point PPR need one running back and one flex between Mike Evans, Alex Collins, and Dalvin Cook. Ooh, I think if I were you, and I can't believe I'm actually going to do this, but I would probably eliminate Dalvin Cook. I think Alex Collins is in a fantastic spot today against Buffalo. Like we talked about just a few minutes ago, one of the worst rush defenses in the NFL. And Mike Evans is going to get volume today because they're going to be down quite a bit. So that's probably the direction that I would go for this. And I would say go ahead and roll with Evans and Alex Collins. Keep your questions coming. We'll continue to go through the matchups. Hopefully we will be joined by Elliot Chris, although I will follow up with him in just a second. I don't think it's going to likely end up happening today. So we'll keep going. We'll roll through the slate, and then we'll connect with Justin Fensterman coming up in about 20 minutes from now. Let's move on to the Houston Texans going to New England. Patriots are entering the game as 6-point favorites, and that's only been moved down slightly. They started off as 6.5-point favorites. And the over-under started off fairly high from 51 to 49.5. I see you, Jeremy. Thank you so much for watching the show, man. I appreciate it. Keep your questions coming over on in the comments. We'll get to them as we continue to break down the slate with you guys. All right, here we go from Lou. Before we get to Houston and New England, for PPR, do I go with Pierre Garcon or Tyler Eifert for the flex? See, Eifert is one of those guys where in most weeks, Lou, I would say Pierre Garcon. I wouldn't tell you to think about it. But the matchup against Minnesota is a very, very difficult one. And Garcon is a great PPR wide receiver. I think in this case, I would tell you to go Eifert because I think the matchup is substantially better and he's healthy. Eifert, when he's producing, is one of the best touchdown receivers in the NFL, not just at the tight end position, but as a receiver, period. And the Colts are not good at stopping the tight end. They're not good at stopping wide receivers. Versus Minnesota, who arguably has one of the best secondaries in the league, one of the best defenses total overall. I think for this week, Tyler Eifert's your guy. And maybe the volume isn't there. Maybe Garcon gets targeted a little bit more, but I think for week one, that's probably the way to go. From Jeremy, love Ryan Griffin today. Big game against the Pats last year, and Watson should be throwing a ton. That's a really interesting pick in Ryan Griffin, and a sleeper that probably you might be able to get at, I would say, honestly, with all the tight ends that are available today on the slate, that might be, Ryan Griffin might be a guy that could get you 3 to 4% ownership. Certainly over at Fantasy Sports Markets, I don't anticipate him being a guy. I think everyone's going to likely be on the Rob Gronkowski train. I think there were some people that started Zach Ertz already. Travis Kelce is going to be a popular play with how many people that are playing out of Kansas City. And if you play Ryan Griffin today, either as a flex or as a tight end or over at Fantasy Sports Markets, and he goes off, you're probably going to be the only buddy on him. And I think that's a really, really intriguing contrarian play. Excuse me. Let's get back to the Pats. Like I said, 6-point favorites, and that moved down from 6.5. Over under right now at 51. From 51 going down to 49.5. Things you need to know: Julian Edelman is out. It's the first of a 4-game suspension for him. And there's going to be a shootout expected in this game. I think people look at it from the standpoint of, well, New England's clearly going to put points on the board, so naturally Houston's going to put points on the board. I think a lot of points are going to be scored. I just don't know how much Houston will be able to continuously keep up. There's weapons there. But think about what the Patriots do. And I know they didn't do this week one last year against the Kansas City Chiefs. And they struggled last year, but they have a new defensive coordinator in there. I think they're going to be a better defense this year. And I always know that what Bill Belichick always tries to do is to exploit your team's biggest strength and try and take it away from you. And I think he's fully aware that Houston and Deshaun Watson like to throw, like to take chances down the field. And I think they're going to want to make sure that that doesn't happen as much. It's hard to stop DeAndre Hopkins. He's going to get anywhere between 8 to 13 targets today. We talked about Ryan Griffin as a possible option as well. Will Fuller is going to take some chances down the field. I think if you're New England, you want Lamar Miller running as long as possible, because Lamar Miller hasn't really impressed a whole lot of people over the last couple of years in Houston. Despite having a lot of volume, there's really nobody else there. I think they want to use him, and I think they want to try and slow down Watson from making plays against him. So I think Houston puts up some points. I think they get some yards through the air, but I don't think it's going to be a spectacular Deshaun Watson performance today. As for the Pats, I think they're going to cruise. I think this is just a monster matchup for today. A lot of people are going to go cheap at quarterback if you're playing on the salary sites, but at Fantasy Sports Markets, Tom Brady is a clear-cut quarterback play for me today. And if you go to Fantasy Sports Markets, you'll see the $1 beat Benny Heist game, where if you have a lineup that does better than me, for your $1 that you enter, you get $2 and also $10 to first place. So basically, if I have a terrible lineup today and I come in 25th, everybody that enters will double their money. So that filled up. We're going to have it every week over at Fantasy Sports Markets. It's a lot of fun, an opportunity for you guys to go up against me and prove it right there on the fantasy football field. But I think Tom Brady's just going to have a monster game in week one. He's always been a week one hero. You're going to see a ton of Gronk today, a lot of Chris Hogan with no Julian Edelman. And then as to whether or not it's going to be Rex Burkhead or James White, a lot of people are trying to figure that one out. And I think James White probably makes the most amount of sense here. Burkhead might be able to vulture a couple goal line carries. They feel very comfortable with him running the football. And so I feel like based on today, they're probably going to use him more as a runner than as a pass catcher. In a Fantasy Sports Markets, it's PPR. So I'm more likely to use James White than I am for Rex Burkhead. I think Brady, honestly, could clear 400 yards today fairly easily. Let's go to Dane. He says, hi, Ben. Standard scoring 14 team keeper. I have a question at flex wide receiver and running back. Do I go Kelvin Benjamin or Jordan Wilkins? Well, Dane, I wish I had a better answer for you. I would say Kelvin Benjamin because I think he'll have the best volume. I just don't trust any of the Colts running backs right now. I think a lot of them are frankly terrible plays. Really, really bad plays today against Cincinnati because I just don't know who it's going to be. We don't know whether it's going to be Marlon Mack. We don't know whether it's going to be Jordan Wilkins. We don't know if it's going to be Naeem Hayes. So Benjamin is likely the guy that I would go with. So thank you for your question. Keep them coming in right over in the comments and reactions section. Whew. Sinus thing is just brutal. Hopefully it sounds okay to you guys as we get to the 9:30 park. Wow, we're already 30 minutes in, and I haven't taken a break. I'm not used to this. I always go for a little bit and take a break, come back, and move on. One more from Jeremy. He says, who has the biggest potential for a Will Fuller type line? 4 catches for 110 yards and 2 touchdowns type of game. That's really interesting. Because I never try and target guys that... You know what? Maybe this is a cop-out answer, Jeremy, but maybe Tyreek Hill against San Diego. Because not San Diego, the LA Chargers. He's cooked Casey Hayward before and has had some big games against the Chargers. You mentioned John Ross. That's another really intriguing pick. I like John Ross a lot today. And also it would be extremely contrarian for you to take John Ross as opposed to AJ Green. So I like that call. I think Kenny Stills with Miami has an opportunity to do that today. I was going to say I like Amendola a lot today, but he's not really that type of a receiver. Other really fast guys that I think I'd say those are probably the guys. And Fuller is more than capable of having that type of game. I usually tend to stay away from somebody like Fuller in daily just because I want volume. I want opportunities. I want targets. And, 4 catches, 110 yards and 2 touchdowns is great, but I usually feel more comfortable if I can get a guy that's I know is going to be targeted 7 to 10 times during a game. I was thinking about Philadelphia. A lot of people were frustrated at the stat lines for Nelson Aguilar and Zach Ertz. But the fact of the matter is that Nick Foles was throwing them the football pretty much throughout the entire game. They were the ones that really were getting the volume, the opportunities. And sometimes just the yardage isn't going to add up. But at some point over the course of the season, if that's where they're going to throughout the game, Nick Foles isn't going to have one of those games where he throws for 110 yards all throughout the year. He's going to get better. And Atlanta's defense is pretty good. But I tend to look for volume as opposed to the guy that could just go nuts with yardage. So really good question there from Jeremy. We were just talking about it. Tennessee. Oh, I'm sorry. No, let's do San Francisco and Minnesota. Vikings are home. They are 6.5-point home favorites, and actually that's been moved up from 4.5. The over-under started at 47 and has since worked its way down to 46. News and notes, Xavier Rhodes, from all accounts, is set to play. Dalvin Cook returns from a torn ACL. And then Alfred Morris is your 49ers starting running back. Jerick McKinnon, who was a very sexy pick amongst the fantasy community early on this year, ended up with a torn ACL at the end of the preseason. He is done for the year. So Alfred Morris, Matt Breida will be your guys in San Francisco. As excited as I am for Dalvin Cook to return, I just have my concerns about the fact that the Vikings offensive coaches have said Latavius Murray is going to get plenty of carries and opportunities. Now, I look at Cook, if you're in a season-long league, as somebody to keep an eye out for, because I think as the season goes on, he's going to get more of those carries, more of those volume, more of that opportunity than he didn't have before. And I think they're going to try and just ease him back, coming back from that torn ACL. So I almost think he's a really intriguing trade candidate, maybe after week 3, week 4, when Dalvin Cook owners who used a second-round pick on him are kind of get frustrated with the lack of big opportunities for him. And I think down the stretch of the second half, Dalvin Cook has a chance to be an elite-level running back 1 for Minnesota. But they want to use Murray because they know that he's durable. They know that he's going to hold up. And that's valuable at the running back spot. But I think as the season goes on, they're going to use Cook more and more. So I don't love him this week. I know the 49ers rush defense is very mediocre at best. If I'm targeting this game, I'm targeting Kirk Cousins, maybe pairing them both with Stephon Diggs and Adam Thielen if I'm looking for a stack. They're both in play. The 49ers pass defense ranked 25th in passing points allowed per game a season ago. And then I know there's a lot of people that love the 49ers today. They love Marquise Goodwin. They love Jimmy G. And I do more so for season long. I just don't think I can in good conscience play them this week against the Vikings in the season opener. West Coast teams who travel out east for that noon Central Time kickoff or the 1 p.m. East Coast time kickoff typically tend to struggle quite a bit. And so I just think there's too many other good matchups out there today. Why risk it, even for low ownership with Jimmy G and Marquise Goodwin in a terrible matchup? So I know he'll get targets, but to me, this is one of those. And by the way, Jeremy, going back to somebody who can have a Will Fuller type game, Marquise Goodwin has that type of speed to be able to do so. The difference is that I think he gets those kind of targets. I just don't see it happening this week. So I will be fading the 49ers offense, who I love in season long, and I feel very good about for the rest of the season, but this is a terrible week one matchup. 9:35 here on FSM Football Sunday, coming up in 10 minutes. Justin Fensterman from SiriusXM Fantasy Sports Radio will join us. He will take some of your questions as well. So we'll break at around 9:43, 9:44 to get him here via Skype. So stick around for that. Let's keep it going with Tennessee and Miami. The Dolphins are 1-point dogs at home. They opened up at minus or at plus 2.5. So a lot of people really like Tennessee, but now Miami's starting to move up here. Over-under has also gone down from 46.5 down to 45. A lot of people are very concerned about Kenyon Drake, with Frank Gore being listed as the co-starter on the depth chart. We know who their real starter is. This isn't a Minnesota situation where you're trying to get Dalvin Cook back from injury, right? Kenyon Drake's going to get 20 to 25 carries in this game, and he is absolutely the starter on this team. It's a good matchup for him. It's not great, but in season longs, I would have no problem with you guys firing up Kenyon Drake today. There's going to be some good weather. It's in Miami. The sun's supposed to be out. I think there could be some sneaky scoring in this game. Ryan Tannehill is also coming back from injury, and Kenny Stills is a very strong start, as is Danny Amendola. They're going to try and make sure that Tannehill gets the ball out quickly, almost very similar to that of Andrew Luck. And Stills went over 100 targets for the first time in his career last year, and he's the number one wide receiver now on this team. For those that keep thinking that Devontae Parker is going to show up, I have a prince in Abu Dhabi that would like to meet with you. It's just not going to happen. We've been waiting for Devontae Parker forever. We can't continue to wait. So I love Stills. I think Amendola is a strong start. I think Tannehill is going to be incredibly contrarian this week. And then as for Tennessee, Delaney Walker, assuming you believe he's healthy from the injury where he had foot surgery over the offseason, I think he smashes today. From Rich Rebar over at Roto-Roll pointing this out, last year the Dolphins allowed a league-high receptions per game to tight ends and also ranked 31st in yardage per game. So Walker also, because of all the good tight end plays this week, has a chance to be extremely low owned. And like I said, Miami ranked 31st in yardage per game to the tight end spot last year. From Jeremy, Chris Godwin for Tampa Bay. Evans will get the attention. Tampa Bay will be playing catch up literally from the jump, and he finished last season on a high note. Yeah, I have no problem with Godwin. I wouldn't start him in season long. I think he's a nice dart throw in DFS at fantasy sports markets for sure. The only way though, Jeremy, that I would feel comfortable playing Godwin is if you are stacking the Saints and the Bucks today. Because then you're just trying to get as much volume from what you expect to be a high-scoring game as possible. So I like Godwin, but it has to be part of a collective stack where you feel like, okay, if New Orleans is putting up a bunch of points today, then I expect Tampa to get into a shootout with them. Those are the times where you target players like that, at least for me. Otherwise, especially on week one, there's just too many intriguing options this week. And also, we haven't really seen much of Godwin other than the preseason game and a little bit of last year. But I think it's an intriguing play, and I could certainly understand it, but I don't think I would do it without a stack. Let's keep things going with Jacksonville and the New York Giants. The Jags are 3-point favorites on the road. The spread has gone down just a half a point. Also, the over-under has gone from 44 down to 42.5. Saquon Barkley, despite missing 3 weeks of training camp with a hamstring injury, he is good to go. I'd expect a full workload out of him going up against Jacksonville. And as elite as Jacksonville was against the pass last year, they were very mediocre and very pedestrian against the run. They were exploiting a handful of games a season ago. You knew that you could run on Jacksonville, and consequently, a lot of the games that they lost was when you were able to run on them. It basically was able to open up the pass for a lot of teams as well. Marquise Lee for Jacksonville, he's out for the year. Every indication is that Keelan Cole will take over the number one duties. You have Dante Moncrief also playing on the outside. D.D. Westbrook is expected to play in the slot. And a couple of the things that I think you need to know for this game is that Leonard Fournette is in a great spot this week. He's third in the NFL in touches a season ago. I'm not a big Fournette fan, but you can't deny the volume. And I think going up against the Giants on the road this week presents a wonderful opportunity. He came in lighter into camp, and I fully expect it to be a really good situation for Fournette to probably get anywhere between 22 to 27 carries today. So he's not an elite level PPR back, but the volume will absolutely be there for Fournette. Blake Bortles, a bit of a sneaky play this week. I know people hear the name Blake Bortles and they throw up in their mouth a little bit. But the Giants struggle in the passing game. They really do. And they got a new coaching staff. It's going to help change things around. Pat Shurmur now there. He's an offensive guy. But Al Zeidenfeld over at the Daily Fantasy Edge always likes to talk about the flow chart. And the flow chart is that you play tight ends against the New York Giants until otherwise stated that you shouldn't. And so right now, Austin Seferian-Jenkins is an intriguing play because the Giants have not shown any indication that they can stop tight ends. So he's another intriguing candidate as a sleeper quality guy for this week. Again, there's so many tight ends this week that you can consider playing that I wouldn't necessarily recommend Seferian-Jenkins as my top tight end play, but I think he's certainly very good. Let's keep things going. Pittsburgh and Cleveland. The Browns are now -4 at home. That went down from 6.5, and the over-under has gone all the way down from 47 to 41. Wind is going to be a serious factor in this game, and that's probably one of the reasons that I wasn't on board with James Conner initially. I like him; he's a good back, but they're going to have to run the ball. It's going to be a problem. Antonio Brown is still always in play because he's Antonio Brown. He can catch the ball deep, he can catch the ball in. And the numbers in the splits for Brown when Le'Veon Bell does not play are drastically in Antonio Brown's favor. Big Ben basically says, all right, well, I don't have one guy I can rely on over here. I have to give the ball to Antonio Brown, and I have to just do it at will. So he's always in play. For Cleveland, I like Tyrod Taylor and Jarvis Landry. I think I still do, even with a lot of the wind conditions, but just be prepared for Landry to catch like 10 balls for 35 yards. I liked it a lot more when the conditions were going to be a little bit better. And actually, this is a really nice spot for Carlos Hyde to be a fairly contrarian play. He's the starting running back. Duke Johnson's still going to get his pass-catching opportunities. But, Carlos Hyde is a more than capable pass catcher. He was the top 10 pass catcher at the running back position a season ago. And they're going to use him until they feel like they have to start getting Nick Chubb some plays. And I don't even necessarily believe that's going to happen this year. I think they're fairly confident in Carlos Hyde. Or maybe they move him for some value, even though he just signed a new deal to eventually get Nick Chubb in. So I picked up Carlos Hyde in one of my fantasy leagues this year. I'm planning on trading him once his value is probably at its peak, but I certainly like him for this week. Let's scroll through some of the afternoon games before we get to Justin Fensterman, where we'll take a quick break. You have the Chiefs going to LA, Chargers 3.5-point favorites at home. That's been moved up from 3. Also one of the games where the over-under has gone up from 47.5 to 49. I did not anticipate a shootout. In fact, I said on one of the radio interviews that I did this week that I was planning on fading the Chiefs. And the more I think about it, the more I think the Chiefs are going to have to throw in this game to compete. And at some point, Mahomes and Tyreek Hill are just going to connect. He's too fast for people to keep with him. And so, if you're looking for, 6 and maybe 100 from Tyreek Hill today, I think that's absolutely fully in play. So I think Kansas City is in play. I think Kareem Hunt's going to catch passes out of the backfield. But Phillip Rivers is in just a monster spot. You've seen how bad the Kansas City secondary has been this year. The likes of, Steven Nelson, Orlando Scandrick, on the outside, and you don't have to worry about who their slot guy is going to be. I know that Keenan Allen plays about 50% of the snaps in the slot, and so I think Kendall Fuller on him is probably going to be the way to go. Hey, we got a question from Boss Man Blake. Although there's no team in San Diego, Blake, so I have to give you shit for that. Chargers wide receiver and Gates stack. I don't think I, in good conscience, can play Antonio Gates. I just can't right now because they signed him. He was just sitting around doing nothing. They signed him about a week or so ago. But I absolutely think you can play Rivers and stack him with Keenan Allen. If you want to do a contrarian play, you can go with somebody like Tyrell Williams. I'm not ready to go ahead and do Mike Williams yet, even though I think he's going to be a red zone monster for them. Maybe less so with Antonio Gates. I think the best play in this game is Melvin Gordon. I know the Chiefs' run defense is bad. They said that they got better, and I know their corners have been getting roasted. But Melvin Gordon's volume is going to be there today. And so he's somebody that I really like. All right, we will get through the afternoon slates coming up in just a bit. We'll take a quick break. We will be back, hopefully, in just a minute with Justin Fensterman of SiriusXM Fantasy Sports Radio. So hang with us. We'll get right back to you guys right here on FSM Football Sunday, the debut here on the Fantasy Sports Markets Network. All right, guys. So a little bit of bad news. Unfortunately, Justin cannot join us today as we welcome you back here on the FSM Football Sunday show right here on Facebook Live. Hopefully you're watching there. We'll have the show up on YouTube as well. Post the links to our Twitter page over at twitter.com/FSM contest and at FSM Network. Unfortunately, Fensty can't join us today. He's got some Wi-Fi connectivity issues. That's okay. Still one of the best in the business and a guy that you should follow at Fantasy Sports. So that gives us another 13 minutes or so to continue to take your questions. We're going up until 10 o'clock a.m. Central Time this morning. We've already got a handful of questions already so far, so continue to bring them to us, and we'll continue to answer them as we continue on through the slate. So Dallas goes to Carolina. There has been no change in the spread at all. The Panthers are 2.5-point home favorites. The only thing that's really changed for this game is that the over-under has gone from 44 down to 42.5. As far as this game goes, I don't... Obviously, you're playing Ezekiel Elliott if you have him in season long, but there's really no reason to play Dak Prescott or any of the Dallas wide receivers. You have, Williams, and you have Terrence Williams and Cole Beasley and Michael Gallup, and maybe Gallup ends up being a decent wide receiver threat, but there's nobody that scares you. And Carolina's defense is aggressive. They will come after the quarterback. They like to blitz. And I think Prescott is in line for a very pedestrian game. On the other side for Carolina, though, I think Cam Newton is in a really nice spot at home in an afternoon game. I love Christian McCaffrey. I think the volume total for him is going to be substantial. I expect anywhere between maybe 12 to 16 rushes from McCaffrey to go along with 6 to 8 receptions, maybe about 10, 11 targets today. Greg Olsen is back healthy after missing a lot of last season, so I feel good about him. I mentioned Devin Funchess is a guy that I like, but I don't love this week. So I think he's absolutely in play, but really for Carolina, it's all about McCaffrey today. I think if you're looking at a play, that's your guy. And maybe Olsen is a contrarian tight end this week with everybody going to be in. We actually might have Justin Fensterman on the line, so let's see if we can try and bring him in. Hey!
Hey, man, I'm sorry about this. I figured it out. I got it on my phone.
All right. Well, Justin, we are live right now. Justin Fensterman is joining us here on the show today. Let's just make sure that people can see. And again, this is a live show, so we are trying to just sort of figure this out as we go along. Fensty, I don't know if let's see if people can hear us as we continue on with the show. If you guys can hear Fensty, go ahead and leave us a comment right now over in the comments and reaction section. Justin, give me a play so far this week that you feel like you're the only guy that's been on. That way we'll be able to test and see whether or not people are able to hear you.
One of the tight ends that I'm looking at, I've been reading that he's going to have a role in some injuries in Miami. Mike Gesicki. I know he's a rookie, but a tight end, cheap tight end that you can go after. I mean, if you look at the Dolphins receiving core, Devontae Parker at this point, he's hurt, so you don't really have him to deal with. You've got Amendola there, but after that, I mean, if you want to play, that's going to be different. Mike Gesicki for tight end. I'm thinking that he's going in the end zone today, Ben.
You know what, though, Fency? That's so interesting because Gesicki is sort of one of those guys as a rookie tight end. And I typically like to stay away from those guys because I always get nervous that it's such a difficult position to learn. When you look at Gesicki, I know you like him. Hayden Hurst is another intriguing tight end in Baltimore. Is he really the only rookie tight end that you're on this year that you feel good about?
Yes, I am. And in fact, in a lot of my dynasty leagues, Ben, I've got Mike Gesicki for that reason because I can keep him and not lose a high round pick. I'm thinking that he's going to have a role early in this offense, and Ryan Tannehill is going to be throwing a lot more.
Awesome. Justin Fensterman from SiriusXM Fantasy Sports Radio and Fantasy Alarm is our guest. You can follow him on Twitter at Fensty Sports as we wrap up the final 10 minutes of the show. Fensty, what you are is a man of the people. You have taken people's questions and helped their lineups win over the last 4 years on Fantasy Football Sunday. So if anybody has any questions for Fensty, leave them in the comments and reaction section. Fensty, one of the questions that we got is whether or not you like the Ravens defense, or do you worry that they're going to be too chalky this week?
I mean, with the Ravens defense, I'm not that worried. More a little bit worried about the weather there, but I don't think it's going to be too chalky. But yes, if you want to start out by going after a team, and you talk about teams in survivor pools as well, the Ravens are one of those teams that you have to target. A big day coming, a good matchup for Alex Collins as well on the offensive side, but the Ravens defense, I'm in on this week.
Okay. We actually didn't have a chance to finish up some of our afternoon slate, so as we continue to wait for questions, I want to go through some of these matchups with you. I look at Washington and Arizona, Fensty, with the Cardinals actually now moving up from being 1-point favorites. It started as a pick-em. The over-under has remained at 44. I think this game has sneaky shootout potential. I think Alex Smith gets to go up against a bad defense in Arizona, even though he's on the road. Jordan Reed is healthy. We'll see how long he stays healthy for, but you know that Smith likes to target tight ends. I think Jamison Crowder's in a really nice spot to succeed, and consequently, Sam Bradford's also healthy, and when he's healthy, he's been a fairly good quarterback. You see this game in a shootout fashion, and what do you make of it?
I actually do, Ben. I think there's going to be a lot of scoring. I've got David Johnson everywhere. But with the Redskins side you were mentioning before, with Jamison Crowder, someone who I think because he was a little bit banged up, forgotten about, not taken seriously as the number one wide receiver there at DC. So with Jamison Crowder, that's a play that I'm looking in my flex spots because I really like the shootout potential in this matchup. When you look at the Cardinals sides of things, the question is, which other receiving option not named Larry Fitzgerald is going to come through for this squad? I mean, you've got J.J. Nelson there. You've also got Christian Kirk, who seems like he's going to be more of the special teams, but could get involved a little bit earlier than anticipated once camp started. Because I don't know about you, Benny Heiss, but I loved what I saw on tape on Christian Kirk going into the season, and then was heartbroken when all of a sudden I read that Christian Kirk was going to be mainly special teams. It broke my heart because this team does not have an established wide receiver too.
This is coming in from our Facebook Live section. Do you go with Kirk Cousins or Phillip Rivers? This question is from Megan.
I mean, Phillip Rivers in a great matchup today, so I'm going to stick with Phillip Rivers against those Chiefs.
All right, we got one more afternoon game to get into, and that's Seattle at Denver. The Broncos opened up as minus 1.5-point favorites at home. That's been bet up to -3. And interestingly enough, two teams that we typically associate with defense, the over-under total has gone up from 42 to 42.5. This is another game with, I think, a little bit of sneaky, not shootout potential, but I think we're going to see a little bit more points scored than initially anticipated, in particular because I think Denver is in a really good spot to succeed. What do you make of the matchup today?
The interesting matchup, I actually have the Seattle defense in a few places because when it comes to Case Keenum, I need to see him be able to mesh with this offense in season, and I want to see it before I can believe it and start putting further faith into the Broncos. However, I do have Demaryius Thomas, and I do think that he's going to be getting a lot of love tonight, so I do love him. It'll be interesting seeing Royce Freeman with what happens. I mean, the Earl Thomas situation definitely keeps Seattle fans at bay, but at the end of the day, I think you're right, Ben. There's going to be a lot of scoring in this game, and some of the players that I'm looking at from this game, like I said, Royce Freeman, Demaryius Thomas, I'm expecting to have a big day on the Seattle side. Right now, in Chris Carson, He's got to be that guy if you're going to put any confidence. But I'm probably, especially in my DFS lineups, staying away from that run game.
All right, another question coming in from Facebook Live from our buddy Seth. Season long, who do you like more long term this year between Russell Wilson and Phillip Rivers?
Very great question. I'm going to have to give the edge to Russell Wilson, trust him a little bit more, but it's not by that much. Phillip Rivers was a guy, Ben, that you could get in the 14th, 15th rounds of your draft. He was one of the last quarterbacks taken. I think he's going to have a big year, and I'm all in on Mike Williams. Whether he explodes this week or not, I think he's going to get at least one touchdown. I am all in on this guy. As long as that back stays healthy, it doesn't matter. I've invested in him on almost every one of my teams, and that's going to be a huge help. And getting Gates back for the Chargers offense. I'm still going with Russell Wilson, though, at the end of the day. I think you're going to be seeing a little bit more production out of him.
All right, let's keep going. We got the Sunday night game with the Bears and the Green Bay Packers. This game opened with Green Bay as 8-point favorites at home. That's now gone down to 7. Also, the total has gone down in this game from 48 down to 47 as well. Question coming in, between which Packers wide receiver do you prefer in Ty Montgomery or Randall Cobb?
Oh, that is a very tough question. It's funny because I don't fully trust Ty Montgomery. However, with Randall Cobb, people are saying he's in the doghouse. He's going to get traded, but the familiarity is key. So at least for week 1, I'm going with Randall Cobb being safe there.
Yeah, I think you're right. And the thing about Cobb that was intriguing to me is that once Jordy Nelson was moved and once they eventually got rid of him, I think Aaron Rodgers was pissed. And I think the familiarity that you mentioned with Randall Cobb is substantial because they mentioned a lot in training camp that a lot of the newer, younger wide receivers just weren't getting the job done.
Once Kumaro got hurt, I think that's, I don't want to say silenced, but I think that definitely stalled all trade talks because now all of a sudden they need the depth. And with Randall Cobb, I mean, people trying to say he's in the doghouse, this and that, but I haven't read much about that, Ben. So because of that and because of what other people are hearing, I'm going to be on this guy at least for today.
Yeah, I think he's a solid play. The Bears have an elite level linebacking crew, but I think there's still going to be some newer moves, and Aaron Rodgers at home on a Sunday night, it's very difficult to go against. From Lou, who do you like at quarterback between Matt Stafford or Russell Wilson this week?
This week, I am actually going to go with, I'm really thinking that Jets-Lions game is going to be a high-scoring game. So I'm going to actually go with Matthew Stafford on the Monday night.
Do you like it on both sides to put up some points, or do you think it's more so Detroit?
I would say that I'm thinking with both sides, the Jets are going to put some points up. You know what? Let's do it. Both are going to be putting up points in this game. I think ultimately the spread was huge, but I think ultimately the Lions are going to win to put up more points. But I do think that both teams are going to I'm thinking the Lions are going to be getting around 25 points in this game at least.
All right. Interesting question from Jeremy, and we can go back and forth on this if you want. He wants to know the guys that you think have the biggest bust potential as far as the big names today. So maybe a quarterback, a running back, and a wide receiver that you think a lot of people are going to be on that you're probably going to fade because you just don't expect it to really go on. He mentions, for example, Phillip Rivers is a guy that he thinks has a chance to have a bust game, Saquon Barkley, Odell Beckham, and Travis Kelce. So are there a couple names that maybe stand out to you today that you're just going to go ahead and stay away from?
I have a bad feeling about Deshaun Watson.
I do too. Okay, I'm really glad you said that. I feel vindicated a little bit.
Yes, this is a situation where everyone's on this narrative. We saw it last year. The problem is we didn't see much of Deshaun Watson last year. And with Will Fuller hurt, how many options does he have? A lot more pressure going to be on Hopkins. At least from the DFS side of things, I'm staying away from this guy.
I look at Roethlisberger in a similar vein. I think the weather just does not present itself well. I think they're going to run the ball with Connor quite a bit today with all the wind. Obviously he's going to throw to Antonio Brown. He's probably going to target him anywhere between like 13 and 18 times. But Roethlisberger, to me, I just don't like the matchup. And he tends to struggle in these road games away from Heinz Field at the noon kickoff. What do you think about that?
Just overall, Ben, like you said, road game, bad weather. James Conner, we'll see if he can handle carrying the full load. We have to wait and see for that, and that's a good reason not to trust this guy.
All right, before we let you go, what about on the flip side? Is there anybody in particular that stands out as far as a sneaky play that you think you're going to be on that maybe nobody else will be on?
A lot of people, Ben, are on Andy Dalton. And I'm thinking that A.J. Green, and this is why, I'm thinking A.J. Green has one of the best matchups of any wide
He
receiver.
does.
And,
I
you
agree.
can always go, Fensty, it's A.J. Green. He's always going to have. That's not true, though. Just because it's A.J. Green or any one of these receivers doesn't mean they have the best matchup of the day. I think A.J. Green happens to have the best matchup of the day. I have him anywhere. And that's a share of Andy Dalton right there. So right there alone, along with Mixon, the health of this team, Tyler Eifert right now healthy, even though I don't put a lot of faith in him. Same with Jordan Reed. A lot of people on Andy Dalton today, Ben.
Fensty, where can the good people that are watching the show find you?
As always, on Twitter, @Fensty Sports. And they're always helping you answer your questions. Also on SiriusXM Fantasy Sports Radio. Every single Saturday, Ben Heisler joined me yesterday in the award-winning segment. We're getting a Marconi for it, Ben. So 6 to 8 a.m. Eastern every single Saturday on SiriusXM Fantasy Sports Radio.
Fensty, you're the best, buddy. Thanks for hopping on. We'll talk to you soon.
Ben, happy week one, and happy week one to all of you.
All right, there you go. That's Justin Fensterman from SiriusXM, good enough to join us here on the opening debut show today. We are just about out of time. I will continue to stay about on Twitter @Benny Heiss. We'll also be taking your questions over on the Fantasy Sports Markets account @FSM Contest and @FSM Network. One final time for those of you guys that are just hopping on today, and I'll try and be able to share the screen with you guys just one more time as we're able to try and figure this out real quick. Again, first show, a little bit of jitters every so often, so stay with us. Well, it's not letting me do it this way. But remember, if you go to fantasysportsmarkets.com, okay? As I make, let's let Justin be off the phone. There he is. And I'm going to go ahead and put the promo code back up on the screen. Go to fantasysportsmarkets.com. We are just under 2 hours away from kickoff from the noon Central Time games. FantasySportsMarkets.com. You type in this promo code Homer. If you haven't used it yet, it will get you $10 to use on any of our contests without a deposit required. So go ahead and play your studs and find your contrarian plays and go and win the big money. Remember, we have a $50,000 perfect roster bonus for our $10 contest today. Plenty of other bonuses throughout. We like to do these quarterback pick 3, running back pick 3, wide receiver pick 3 games. And some of the contests have already filled up, so you're going to have to make sure next week you get in on them early, including the Beat Benny Heiss game for just $1, where if you beat my lineup, you get 2. You double up your money with an opportunity to get $10 to first place and a perfect roster bonus as well. Thank you guys. I know that there was a lot going on in the first show, but it means a lot that you spent some time with me this morning. Thank you guys for your questions, for your interaction. And as far as the plan goes, we will continue to do this again next week. Continue to take your questions. Continue to bring in some of our insiders as well. So thank you guys for being a part of this show. For Fensty, for everybody at Fantasy Sports Markets, my name is Ben Heisler. Thanks for being a part of our show. We'll continue to take your questions up to kickoff on Twitter @Benny Heiss, @FSM Contest, and @FSM Network. Till next time, we'll talk to you guys soon. Be good.